It is the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. We're here every single day from 5 to 6 talking about the local issues that matter to you most and taking your phone calls at 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. Your emails as well at randykabc@gmail.com. And wherever you get your podcasts like Apple Podcasts, search for the KABC News Blitz and give us a subscribe, give us a follow. I want to give a huge shout out and thanks to all of the mom and pop landlords that filled up LA City Hall today in going after Hugo Soto Martinez and Eunisses Hernandez for trying to slip one past the goalie and in the name of helping the victims of the fire try to pass an eviction moratorium and a rent freeze that would have got even more mom and pop landlords to get out of the business and sell to the big corporations. There is a lot of sound we're going to play from today's LA City Council meeting where that motion got continued back to committee because too many people were paying attention to it. But I got to play this piece of sound first because this is the sound of all of those mom and pop landlords, concerned citizens in the building booing Hugo.
I know the discussion is happening, but I just want to sort of center the decision that we're making today because I think most people could agree it's the right thing to do in this moment. Thank you.
No! Boo! I love it. That was so satisfying, but not as satisfying for how vigorous some of the defenses of the mom and pop landlords were from, you'd expect it, Traci Park, and of course, LA City Councilman from the North Valley, John Lee. This is the most aggressive I've ever heard him at a city council meeting in all the years I've been covering him. And he didn't take it anymore because the last thing we need to do in the wake of these fires is do all the stupid things that we did during COVID that made life so much harder for everybody. Those eviction moratoriums caused so many mom and pop landlords to sell and get out of Dodge. And now there's even more corporate ownership of these buildings. There's even more, all the things they want to do, protect all the people from gentrification and using the Ellis Act to kick out people that are in rent control buildings. All of that accelerated because of the eviction moratoriums. And what do Hugo and Eunisses want to do? Bring it back the second they get a chance. Well, it didn't work today. So I'm going to play you some of the sound so you can congratulate some of your LA City Council members that did a good job today. You can go after the members of the LA City Council that do not have your back in the name of protecting everybody. They want to screw everybody over. Because think about what a rent freeze would mean. And yes, it's very expensive to live here. I am the first person to admit that. And not the last person. Everyone will admit that. It's incredibly expensive to live here. But if you have a situation where you implement an across-the-board rent freeze in the city of Los Angeles, when costs are about to go through the roof for homeowners and for landlords, including utility costs, believe you me, if SoCal Edison is found to be responsible for the Eaton fire, your electricity rates are going to go through the roof. And the insurance companies, they are going to pass on the cost of paying all these claims onto you as well. So imagine if you're a landlord, a mom and pop, you've got a small 4-unit, maybe an 8-unit building, you know, like Melrose Place, and you find out that now your utility costs are going through the roof and your insurance is going through the roof. And by statute, by ordinance from the LA City Council, you cannot raise your rents for an entire year. You've got to eat all those costs. Chances are you're going to sell it to BlackRock or some other developer that's going to demolish the place, making less rent-stabilized housing, and they're going to build a gigantic condominium that nobody wants. That's what's been happening, but it didn't happen today. So let's go ahead and get to John Lee in the most pissed off I've ever heard him, and this isn't even the most pissed off clip.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, colleagues, it's disappointing and concerning to see the eviction moratorium being pushed forward today. At a time with so much uncertainty, this body is choosing to take advantage of an event that demands compassion and thoughtful response. Instead of offering real targeted support, we're pursuing a blanket policy that is only going to make a complicated housing crisis even worse.
And this isn't even about the people that have lost their homes that burned down in the fire. What Hugo and Eunisses say is we need this because of all of the people that worked in the Palisades, that worked in Altadena, that are out of jobs. Your gardeners, your maids, your nannies, your pool boys, what have you. There are a lot of employment that was in those homes, in those areas, and now those people need work, and those people are going to run out of money, and those people are not going to be able to pay their rent. So why aren't we specifically figuring out ways to get those people other work?
Let's be clear. Nobody today is denying that the folks...
And instead, let's do a blanket rent stabilization, rent freeze, and eviction moratorium for 4 million people. Or however many people rent here. Half? 2 million people.
Let's be clear. Nobody today is denying that the folks who were impacted by the fires need help. We are all in agreement on that. But to approve a blanket policy that ties the hands of housing providers and once again forces control of their properties out of their hands would be a misstep by this body.
I don't know how you can be a business owner in this city when the city council on a whim can completely change the way your business is run. Every single year, it seems they want to try to do something like this. And this is after the LA City Council has already passed the toughest renter protections anywhere. They got everything they wanted and more, but it's not enough for the DSA and for Hugo and Eunisses and Nithya. And Isabel, but I don't know if she was there today. She didn't speak.
When we as a city tell developers and property owners that at any moment the Los Angeles City Council can commandeer your investment, who is going to want to build in this city? Who is going to want to do business here? If we truly want to help those directly impacted by the fires and have been displaced, then let's focus on doing that in a way that doesn't harm housing providers and discourage investment in the very housing our city desperately needs.
There's a whole lot of people that have lives and livelihoods that showed up to this meeting. The gadflies didn't even have room to be in there because there were actual concerned residents and concerned business owners and concerned landlords that knew that if this went through, they were done. They were out of here.
Every other agency that is offering assistance has clear processes in place, whether it's FEMA, the Department of Economic Opportunity, or EWDD. They require proof of eligibility. So why are we insisting on taking a different, less effective approach? Self-attestation is the least effective way to do this.
So if you don't know what self-attestation means, that's what was in Hugo's ordinance that did not pass today, got kicked back down to committee. That would mean that anybody, if they're in the threat of an eviction, or let's just say, because we saw a lot of this during COVID, they just don't want to pay their rent, they could say, oh, I'm affected by the wildfires. And you don't have to back that up because that's how the eviction moratorium was written for COVID. Anybody could say, oh, I'm affected by COVID. I can't pay my rent. And that thing went around for 3 years.
Do we really believe that landlords are going to be willing to rent to people who have lost everything, very well knowing that as soon as they rent to a new tenant, they will immediately take a financial loss on their goodwill?
And this wasn't the norm, but there were definite cases of people who knew they had all the protections in the world, and they decided to apply for a rental, go past all the credit checks, knowing that as soon as they got in, they weren't going to pay a dime because they knew they couldn't get kicked out. That's not the norm, but it definitely did happen, and I'm sure that weighs on every single landlord out there.
This emergency should
I'm sure there are plenty of homeowners who want to maybe open up a room in their houses to some of the people that are desperate, that want someplace to go, and maybe you've got extra room, maybe you've got an ADU, whatever it is, but the fear of the city of Los Angeles putting another eviction moratorium out there, well, that's going to stop you from even thinking about that.
This emergency should not be a zero-sum game. Responsible policymaking should not benefit one group of people at the expense of others. That is exactly what this moratorium seeks to do, act without thinking critically about our decisions.
And it almost seems like they're trying to use a disaster to put forth their radical policies. Luckily, right now, there are not enough members in the LA City Council for their radical agenda to get passed, but that number is getting larger every single election. While the rest of the country and even the rest of California moves in one specific direction, and even LA County, as evidenced by George Gascon getting kicked out, as evidenced by Prop 36, the LA City Council's DSA caucus grew in the last election.
Even the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing is asking to be exempt from this policy, warning that this is something that could seriously harm their ability to develop future affordable housing.
Even the nonprofits are like, we can't do this.
Why is it every time we as a city are facing any kind of problem, we pass it on and say, you know what, it's not our job to do as a city council. You know what, you take care of the problem. As a city, we have the resources and the means to help the people that are affected, the people that are falling through the cracks. We have the ability to help those people.
Yes, you could target this. You could prescribe this to specifically the people that have lost their livelihoods in the wake that they can't work because their place of business burned down. That's devastating. And there are ways to deal with that don't include screwing over the entire rental world, because even if you think you're helping the renters, when you have more and more mom and pop selling to the developers and selling to the corporates, you're not helping anybody.
If your concern are for those people who are not eligible for...
How many Avalons do you need to see? They're everywhere now.
If your concern are for those people who are not eligible for the numerous resources, there are various programs available to assist them. Not long ago, this very council passed some of the strongest tenant protections in the city's history. Are we now suggesting that those protections are somehow just not effective enough? If we truly believe those protections made a difference, we shouldn't need an eviction moratorium.
Now, John Lee goes on for another minute to talk about process and procedure, and this should have been in committee, and I'm not going to bore you with all that. But let me just play you the applause he got at the end.
Thank you.
And thank you again, because the LA City Council public comment is usually full of crazies and gadflies and that guy that likes to sing Korean karaoke. The fact that these meetings are in the middle of the day makes no sense. You know, there's a lot of city councils, especially the smaller cities. Their meetings are at night, so members of the public and concerned citizens can attend. But landlords made it their business to be there because they weren't going to let Hugo slip one past the goalie. But let's hear him out. Maybe he's not just trying to pass some crazy agenda, because there is a belief in the Democrat Socialists of America that nobody should be a homeowner, nobody should be a landowner, everyone should just be getting government housing.
Thank you so much, Council President. I want to make comments on the item. I think we'll have a vote about referring it to committee soon, but I just want to clarify.
Oh yeah, as soon as John Lee spoke, then Bob Blumenfield spoke, and Bob Blumenfield was like, yeah, there's no way this is getting voted on today. And he made a motion to get this thing kicked back to the committee. You don't need to know that, but I'm a geek for process.
But I just want to clarify a few things for the public and for my colleagues, because I think a lot of things were said that are just simply not true. Well, one thing that was true is the comments that people don't know what they're voting on, and that's reflective on the comments that they made. There's clearly not understanding what's in front of us. First of all, this is not a blanket policy.
Sure sounds like one, especially with the rent freeze and the anybody can say, oh, I'm affected by the wildfires, and doesn't have to back that up.
Anybody that thinks this is a blanket policy is clearly not reading the language right or reading the amendments that were introduced.
Okay, well, that's two different things, because the amendments were what Hugo and Eunisses tried to horse trade right before the meeting started to get everyone to sign on, to push this thing through. But no. What you tried to bring before the city council was an eviction moratorium in the style of COVID in the wake of this fire disaster, which is a completely different kind of disaster. And I think everyone can agree the eviction moratoriums did more harm than good.
This is a very narrowly tailored policy that is seeking to help the people who have had economic hardship or have lost their jobs due to the fires. That's it. It's not about anybody else.
And all you have to do is say that you were a victim of the fires or you were affected by the fires.
Oh, folks, everyone in this room can agree that those folks need our support right now in the city of Los Angeles. Now, so that image is clear. That is who we're trying to address right here. And I have a constituent in my district that I spoke to yesterday that lost her job. She lost her job the day after the fire because the place where she worked burned down. And the only thing there's no paycheck. The only thing she has is unemployment, and that's not going to be enough to pay the rent. It's going to take her a little bit to get on her feet, which I think a year of this policy is more than adequate.
Oh, we need a year for that.
Now, people keep using the word eviction moratorium, eviction moratorium. This is not an eviction moratorium. This is an eviction defense. There is a difference.
Bird by another feather, rose by another name.
There is a difference between the two. I see some faces in the crowd reacting to it. Eviction moratorium would be that nobody can file eviction filing. That can still happen. This gives a tenant the ability to defend themselves if they're being evicted, and there is a process for that.
Don't we already have that? We already have all the strongest tenant protections, including you can't get evicted if you're just a month late on your rent. They got to wait until you owe at least a fair value market rate rental for a month. So what exactly do you need to go further than all the stuff you already passed 2 years ago when you got rid of the eviction moratorium?
The first process is that they have the ability to self-attest under the penalty of perjury.
Yes, because people never lie, and nobody lied during COVID.
They're not just doing some sort of form.
You can hear the rabble-rousing already going on with the people in the crowd.
They're not just doing some sort of form. There's actual consequences to that. Moreover,
someone said, oh, please.
Moreover, there is also a process where the housing department can engage with the tenant to figure out what exactly is going on, and they can be involved through that process as well. And even then, if a landlord decides to continue the eviction, a tenant will be able to litigate that in front of a judge. So let's just be clear about what we're talking about. There is a process here. There is no blanket policy.
Then what exactly are you trying to impose? And notice he's not even talking about the rent freeze.
And I've heard people talk about let's try to...
And by the way, this is for people that are already under LA rent control. And LA rent control, the rent stabilization ordinance for all the old buildings, that rents were supposed to go up by 4% in February, which is what was negotiated, especially to make up for all the years where they couldn't raise anything. And this was Hugo and Eunisses' attempt to lock that in so it doesn't happen. And that would put people who, if you're a mom and pop landlord of a rent stabilized unit, you're making the thinnest of margins and your costs are about to explode, and Hugo doesn't care.
And I've heard
Hugo, with this policy, is encouraging you to sell to the big corporates.
And I've heard people talk about let's try to find money for rental assistance. Well, unfortunately, the money that we've had in ULA for rental assistance has been tapped out.
They already used all of that money that they needed to solve the homelessness crisis with the money that was to tax on sales of $5 million or more homes, which they called the mansion tax, but turns out any apartment building would count for that. They already blew through all that money and they didn't solve homelessness. And now they need that money for rental assistance for the people that are affected by these fires, and they don't have it.
Not only is it tapped out, but we've tapped the future money of that for that fund has also been tapped out. So yeah, we can find the money, and I agree, we should find the money, but it's not like we have it waiting in our coffers ready to transfer over to support people. That is going to take time.
So Hugo's message to landlords: the city is broke, so should you be.
And that is going to be, we're going to have to find the money somewhere else in the city. So that is what's in front of us. And so my constituents have to pay the rent in 3 days. That's what they're dealing with. They have to pay the rent in 3 days. And as a city of Los Angeles, we have to say something to support those people. I think we can all agree on that. And so, and the other comments were made about, well, what if a factory closes down? No one's talking about one factory closing down. We're talking about the city of Los Angeles facing one of the largest natural disasters in the last 40 years.
Well, the argument that he's making is what Bob Blumenfeld said before him, which is we don't even know how many people we're talking about are directly affected with this. And if you don't have that quantifiable number and you decide we just need to pass a blanket policy that affects every renter in the city, does that make sense?
That we're talking about
They did that with COVID because everyone had to stay home and a lot of people were out of work. And even then, it was a disaster.
That we're talking about a scale that is affecting a ton of people. And so I think we have to act with a certain level of urgency and say this is the right thing. And the last thing I would say is I am personally very bothered by this sort of small landlord, corporate landlord division. I'll tell you, I've talked to a lot of small landlords. Many of you are here today.
Yes, because they're the ones that are going to lose their livelihoods. You think BlackRock cares?
Smaller landlords, mom and pops, have more sympathy. They have more compassion. They rent to people that they know. The referrals come from friends. They build relationships with those folks. I have no doubt, and I've heard the stories, I have no doubt that many of you will act with compassion and sympathy for someone who was economically affected by the fire and say, you know what, I'll have a little forgiveness. But who is not going to forgive is those corporate landlords that are owned by BlackRock and Berkshire Hathaway. They will have no sympathy. They will spit out a letter, and that person will be immediately in eviction court.
Well, then why don't you target legislation that specifically goes after landlords of 150 units or more or something like that? Why are you still targeting the mom and pops that you say you care about?
So we have to look out for the people that are the most vulnerable here in the city of Los Angeles, which is why we put forward this policy. So I know the discussion is happening, but I just want to sort of center the decision that we're making today, because I think most people could agree it's the right thing to do in this moment. Thank you.
Hugo getting booed by the landlords is fantastic. This motion getting voted down today is fantastic. And we're just getting started because you haven't even heard Traci Park's takedown of all this nonsense. Eunisses Hernandez's nonsense retort to it. Hugo desperate for people to believe that he's not trying to screw everybody over. And John Lee straight up calling Hugo a liar. It's all coming up next. If you want to weigh in on Hugo Soto Martinez and Eunisses Hernandez's attempted eviction moratorium in the wake of the fires, you can give us a call, 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. We're going through the sound of today's LA City Council meeting where Hugo Soto Martinez and Eunisses Hernandez were given quite the defeat and did not get to go forward with an eviction moratorium that they say was supposed to help wildfire victims, was really supposed to affect everybody and screw over the mom and pop landlords just like they did during the COVID days. Before we get back to that sound, how about this? 790 KABC welcomes 9 Inch Nails to the Kia Forum on September 18th. Tickets are on sale Wednesday at Ticketmaster.com. But right now, call in number 9 at 1-888-795-2222. Gets a pair of tickets to the show. Tickets furnished by Live Nation. Good luck dialing. When we come back, it's Traci Park time. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. It is the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. We're here every single day from 5 to 6 talking about the local issues that matter to you most and taking your phone calls at 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. Your emails as well at randykabc@gmail.com. And wherever you get your podcast, search for the KABC News Blitz and get our podcast. Hit subscribe. We're going through the sound of today's LA City Council meeting where Hugo Soto Martinez not only got voted down, he got booed.
I think most people could agree it's the right thing to do in this moment. Thank you.
That was a barrage of mom and pop landlords that showed up to LA City Hall today to advocate voting against Hugo and Eunisses' plan to enact an eviction moratorium and a rent freeze in reaction to the devastating fires in the Palisades and into Altadena. Before we get back to Traci Park, we're taking your phone calls at 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. Let's go to Ray in Manhattan Beach. Ray, hello.
Yes. What the government's doing there is they're moving the financial burden onto individual property owners, which is absolutely devastating. Rent control actually makes rents higher because nobody wants to invest in putting in housing, and people in the very low end, the low cost units never move, making them never available. The other thing that's going to happen to these poor mom and pop, owners is when they pass and their children inherit the properties, Prop 19, you will see 5-10 times the tax increase. And guess what? You've got a property under rent control where you can't raise the rents, but your property taxes went up 10x. And it's crazy. I just saw here in town, a small business, the owner of the property died, the rents of the to the business people tripled, and they had to shut their business down. What the government is doing is absolutely absurd, and the mansion tax isn't on mansions; it's on anything over $5 million, which is commercial properties and everything else, which is incredibly inflationary. Nobody wants to do business in the city of Los Angeles because it's so punitive.
Well, and we've seen what the end result of these policies are. When you have these mom and pop landlords with these rent stabilized ordinance, rent control buildings, and their costs go up and they cannot recoup those costs, what do? They end up selling to whoever will buy, which is usually the corporates or the larger developers who then use the Ellis Act to evict all of those people that were in rent control. Now they have to find a new place to live so they can mow down the building and build a tall luxury apartment building. We've seen it over and over and over again. But the LA City Council, at least certain members of it, still try to push this crap through.
The other problem with the corporate ownership is a lot of times the really nice neighborhoods, people never sell the houses until someone passes, then that property becomes available. Corporations don't die. When they tie up the property, it's tied up forever, and those properties will never become available. So when they're buying up single family houses in neighborhoods and whatnot, they're driving up those costs of those properties forever, because the average ownership time frame on a property is 7 years, and they're buying them forever. So those properties are removed from the market forever, which is inflationary and makes housing prices go up.
You're totally right about that. Thanks so much for the call, Ray. I'm surprised, as evident as that is, especially in places like San Diego, where 30% of all home sales were to these big investment firms. Why isn't there any legislation locally, statewide, or federally targeting that? Let's go to Gary in Beverly Hills. Gary, hello.
Why is the city council's charity put upon the individual landlords, just as with COVID? And more importantly, I didn't get the memo of when I can go to Costco and buy all the food I want, or grab all the food I want for free, because I'm unfortunate. If they want me to get free food or free rent or free anything, let the city council provide those funds, which they've already sucked dry from us for years. But don't put it upon me or Costco or Ralph's or anybody. It's not my. You're charitable. The city wants to be charitable. Fine. Issue a bond. Charge us another half-cent sales tax. Try to get that past the voters. But to just put it upon the owners of real estate seems just absurd.
It's completely insane, and that's why, luckily, it did not pass today. But you know they're going to keep trying. Gary, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate it. Let's go to Dave in L.A. Dave, hello.
Hey, by the way, I love your fish taco recipe. I tried it months ago. You talked about that. It was great. But
I'm so glad.
If these left wingers, it's another spoke in the wheel that they've broken. The wagon train is broken down because of these ignorant people in control. The people are in control. They're ignorant left-wing radicals. And if they would just do the right things, I could go into them. I can go into the things, but I'm not. It's going to take a little bit of time. Kevin De Leon of the city council can't even cite the Pledge of Allegiance. That's how ignorant he is. If they did the right things, we wouldn't have these problems flat out.
I think you make a really good point, although I will note Kevin De Leon no longer on the city council. He got voted out, and now there's a DSA Isabel Jurado in there, another Eunisses clone. Dave, thanks so much for the call. I'm glad you liked the fish. Appreciate it. I love that fish taco recipe. I need to make that soon. When we come back, you're going to hear Traci Park completely rip this plan into shreds and do it very effectively, showing you all the things that she's doing, which should make every member of the West Side proud that she is their member of the LA City Council. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. Let's get to Traci Park and her reaction to the proposed eviction moratorium and rent freeze from Hugo, Soto, Martinez, and Eunisses Hernandez. Let's all remember the Palisades was her district.
Colleagues, we all know that the Palisades fire destroyed more than homes, countless businesses and workers, grocery stores, nail salons, classrooms, churches, libraries, the YMCA, all of it saw destruction and immediate disruption overnight. My number one priority for these last 22 days has been to advocate and fight for the entire Palisades community. Immediately after the fires, my team worked with UFCW to confirm what assistance, if any, their workers at Ralph's and Gelson's and Vaughn's needed. Thankfully, those workers had already been placed at other stores and have not experienced job loss. But we didn't.
And that is a true thing. And that's great. All the supermarkets that lost a location in the Palisades, they stepped up and they relocated their employees. I heard the most heartwarming story on my guilty pleasure, the Melrose Place Rewatch podcast that I listen to every week, where Courtney Thorne-Smith, who got evacuated in the fire, I don't think she lost her home, that Palisades Gelson's was her Gelson's. And she ended up going to the Century City one while she's evacuated. And she saw one of the employees that she knew there. And she was so happy to see him. And she gave him a hug. And it's a beautiful thing. Yeah, I'm a dork.
But we didn't stop there. We learned about other economically displaced and vulnerable workers like housekeepers and gardeners, and my team and I have been working with the entire CD11 community to place those individuals in new job opportunities.
Now, that's the kind of constituent services that you don't see the flashy headlines for, that you don't get enough recognition for. But instead of these blanket policies that are going to have many unintended consequences, what is Traci Park doing? Well, when she finds somebody, whether it's a gardener, whether it's a nanny, it's a maid, it's somebody that their livelihood was based on a home that burned down in the Palisades, she's doing everything she can to connect those people with other willing homeowners that are like, I'll hire them. I'll give them work, because there's plenty of people whose houses did not burn down in the West Side that would love to hire those people. That is a beautiful thing, and that is exactly what a city council person should do.
And Councilmember Soto Martinez, I know that you have shared heartbreaking stories of constituents who have lost their jobs. If you have individuals, please refer them to us, because my entire district will bend over backwards to help get people reemployed.
How about that? Instead of the sob stories, Hugo, instead of this legislation that's not going to really help people, tell me who needs work and let's try to get them work, because there's plenty of people that are doing okay right now that would love to help somebody whose livelihood was wiped out. And if they can help them with direct assistance, great. But you know what's even better than that? Helping them with another job, because there's plenty of people that maybe they don't have a gardener right now. Maybe they don't have a maid right now. Get a maid, everybody. You can afford it. It'll save your marriage.
Here in council, right after the fires, we adopted a series of motions to support workers. In partnership with Councilmember Price, we've already had EWDD secure $20 million in state funding to help economically displaced workers, and this will include temporary housing assistance.
So we're already doing this on top of the philanthropic efforts that are out there as well. So this has nothing to do with helping those people. There's more from Traci Park, and we'll get to it. We'll get to as much as we can. I'll try to play some of this on John Phillips' show tomorrow, too, because I can't get to all of it. It was an hour. It was beautiful. Watch the city council meeting on YouTube today. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. Let's go to Cindy in Chino. Cindy, hello.
Hey, good afternoon. I just wanted to point out, because Traci Park comes across really great, and she does seem like she knows what she's doing, but it's my understanding she got $400,000 as a campaign donation from the fire department, and then also voted to cut the budget. She went along with it. And just in general, I mean, the residents really need to figure out what these people stand for and whose side they're on. And so, again, we all give her a pass because she seems like she knows what she's doing, but cutting the safety services, and no one's even talking about the police department and the communication system that's not working. That's the next big accident to happen. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Well, I appreciate that concern, and you're right. There definitely was a vote, and Way more people voted to cut that budget than ever should have. And I know some people want to say, oh, it wasn't a cut. It was a cut. And that's not cool. The city was in a deficit and they were not going to cut from the police department. They had to cut from somewhere. It's still no excuse. I will say, despite all of that, there's no bigger advocate on that council right now for the firefighters than Traci Park. So I'm glad we have her. And everything I've seen from her, she knows how to do her job. And she's not just there for symbolism and nonsense like the rest of them.
Okay, very good. Just wanted to throw that in.
Well, thanks so much for the call, Cindy. Appreciate it. Let's hear just a little snippet of Eunisses reacting to Traci Park.
I take great offense to what was just said by Councilmember Park because my heart aches for the loss that happened in Palisade, both the lives and the property. And when the motions came out to support your region, no question, threw down and supported what you put forth. Why?
We threw down with you, Traci. How could you do this to us? Let us pass our rent freeze.
Threw down and supported what you put forth. Why? Because I understood the urgency.
The throwing down, that is a choice. A very interesting choice. And then, let's see, let me give you the rest of the timeline when I can, because everyone spoke, and then they voted to push this back to committee, but didn't get enough votes because Hugo wanted to whine for a little longer about, we don't have the money. It's going to take so hard for us to directly assist people, except for all the money that's already out there directly assisting people. And then John Lee wasn't done.
It looks like this body is looking to continue this item. If it was come up to the vote, I would simply vote no. I'm frustrated that policies that affect the city in a mass scale are often just waived for us to deal with here on the floor. And that's why I recommended that we reintroduce something to be introduced on Friday. But being a member of this body does not give you the ability to stand up and just straight lie to people.
Ooh, you heard that, Hugo?
So it was earlier said that some of us had not understood this motion.
Look, there's so much more of this sound. I'll try to play some of it on John Phillips' show, but you can do a Google on the YouTube for today's LA City Council meeting. All of this debate starts about 3 hours and 30 minutes in. You'll enjoy it, especially the part of Hugo Soto Martinez getting booed.
I think most people could agree it's the right thing to do in this moment. Thank you.
It's the News Blitz on KABC.